Hi, today I'm going to be talking about caffeine and athletic performance. So the broad use of caffeine in today's world, caffeine is classified as a stimulant and is performance enhancing. It is the most commonly used psychoactive drug in the entire world, and results of studies reported over the last 5 years strongly indicate that caffeine effectively increases athletic performance in endurance events. According to Jenkinson and Harbert in 2008, persons were able to complete a cycling time trial significantly faster after caffeine ingestion, and a 2,000-meter rowing time was reduced by 1.2% after caffeine ingestion. Caffeine has been shown to increase speed and power, and it also allows the athlete to train longer at a higher intensity. So caffeine in the areas of the body that it affects. Caffeine affects the central nervous system, hormonal system, metabolic system, muscular, cardiovascular, pulmonary, and renal functions during both rest and exercise. Caffeine also stimulates the bronchodilation of alveoli, vasodilation of blood vessels, neural activation of muscle contraction, blood filtration in the kidneys, catecholamine secretion, and lipolysis. These metabolic, physiologic, and hormonal effects of caffeine lower the respiratory exchange ratio, peripheral fatigue, rating of perceived exertion, the threshold for exercise-induced cortisol and B-endorphin release. They also increase oxygen uptake, cardiac output, ventilation, circulation levels of epinephrine, metabolic rate, and fat oxidation during endurance exercise in trained and untrained individuals. Caffeine use in athletics and how they increase performance. Drug use among athletes for the purpose of achieving athletic benefit started at a very young age, mostly around 11 years old. So of 11 to 18-year-old students surveyed, 35% believed caffeine would enhance performance and 25% used caffeine in an effort to increase athletic performance. Caffeine studies involving endurance exercise has shown to increase work output and time to exhaustion. So caffeine is letting you work harder and work longer before coming to exhaustion. The ability to perform at high intensity has been examined in several studies. In one study, participants simulated a 1,500-meter run, and coffee ingestion produced a 4.2-second improvement in running speed. Obviously, these participants were untrained individuals, as you would not see such a huge jump in trained individuals. So then, caffeine can affect the muscle glycogen that you have in your body. Use of caffeine in competition and workouts have been shown to increase the idea of what's called glycogen sparing. Glycogen sparing is when the body starts to burn more fats instead of burning glycogen. And it does this by elevating the free fatty acids in the blood, which allows the body to use the free fatty acids as more of an energy source than the carbohydrates. Professor John Hawley, head of RMIT's exercise metabolism group, found that athletes who had caffeine with their meal after exercise had 66% more glycogen in their muscles 4 hours later. So this is the idea that after a workout, ingesting caffeine is also going to allow you to have glycogen sparing. And he states that if you have 66% more fuel for the next day's training or competition, there is no question that you'll be able to go further and faster. So caffeine also affects the central nervous system. It stimulates the secretion of serotonin in the cerebral cortex. This enhances the action of the sympathetic system and diminishes the activity of the inhibitory neurons. Also, when it interacts with the central nervous system, caffeine is going to block receptors for adenosine. Adenosine is a neuromodulator which binds to the receptors and slows down nerve cell activity. When caffeine blocks this binding site at the receptor, it essentially speeds up the activity of the cells, because adenosine is something that is going to slow down the nerve cell activity. There are also 4 different types of adenosine receptor subtypes: A1, A2, A2B, and A3. Also with the central nervous system, The widespread use of caffeine is related to its ability to stimulate the nervous system and increase alertness. The hardest criteria to characterize and quantize with regard to exercise and caffeine have been the effects on increasing mental alertness. And although unclear at present, the decreases in perceived exertion may be due to the increased threshold of excitation in the central nervous system, which is likely due to changes in the neurotransmitters, the chemical compounds responsible for signaling between neural cells. And then, after looking at all these different things that caffeine helps with, some detrimental effects is that caffeine affects the cardiovascular system function and may adversely affect the health of the athletes. It increases heart rate, both systolic and diastolic pressure in normal individuals and mildly hypertensive individuals. Increasing the systolic blood pressure is normal, and that should happen when anybody does any type of exercise. But if it raises the diastolic blood pressure too much, that's what can be truly detrimental to the health of an athlete. Caffeine is a central nervous stimulant, so it increases wakefulness and can cause sleep fragmentation. Causing sleep fragmentation is something that in the long run can be very detrimental to the health of an athlete, especially during their time of competition. And then finally, caffeine can block the adenosine, which when adenosine gets there to the body in times of falling levels of oxygen, it reduces the production of erythropoietin. And erythropoietin is a hormone secreted by the kidneys that increases the rate of production in blood cells in response to falling levels of oxygen in the tissues.